as well. Then Warwick Lucas joining us from Galileo Capital. Warwick, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It has been an interesting time. South Africa's currency, not so long ago when the South African Reserve Bank decided to hike interest rates in a surprise move, we saw the rand then get a whole lot better, even headed towards 13.50. We're back above 14.
Yeah, here we go. And I think part of it relates to such a topsy-turvy week. I mean, the trouble with ceasefires is that all they are is a ceasefire. And one is always rather close to going back into the old war quite quickly, as we've seen with this Huawei executive arrest. So, yeah, I mean, something that looked like optimism starting this week. It was a fabulous Monday. A bit of caution creeping in, and of course by now everyone's slashing their wrists again.
No more Santarelli.
No more Santarelli. And of course the rand is an emerging market currency. It is going to suffer from this risk-off that we saw. I mean, the rand was pretty much, what, about 13.5 in the beginning of the week, and here we are 70 cents lower. Yeah,
it's quite a scary picture. So what do we do now? What do we look forward to, perhaps towards the end of the year, as data begins to trickle lower, to perhaps shape up the state of South Africa's rand and maybe even the market?
Look, the fact that they had a ceasefire at all shows that there is an intent to try and get things right.
Okay.
And I think the key issue now with the case of this executive arrest, is an example going to get made, or is it a negotiating issue, or is it simple bureaucracy? We don't really know. It certainly complexifies things, but hopefully it turns into just another storm in a teacup.
Yeah, one can only hope. OPEC meeting. So yesterday they meet, and of course say the market wants around 1.3 million barrels per day cut. Saudi Arabia suggests only 1 million. It seems Nigeria, on the other hand, says they're not anywhere near an agreement. Some of the other parties as well not saying there's an agreement. Qatar leaves the OPEC region a little bit early in the week. Russia, Saudi Arabia have their own pact. A whole lot certainly happening when it comes to OPEC. It's now even called OPEC Plus. What is going on?
Well, it's certainly a bit of a messy club these days. And frankly, I think some of the fragmentation is starting to show that OPEC has started to lose its grip. Your biggest producer now being the US. I don't think OPEC ever foresaw that happening in anyone's lifetime. Qatar, a tiny country, a relatively small member of OPEC, might be small in terms of oil, but they're absolutely massive in terms of gas. I mean, we're talking
it shows the fragility of them, though, as well, doesn't it?
Very much so, and the division, because, of course, with the political isolation happening on Qatar, is going to force their hand into the Turkish-Russian camp instead of a kind of an OECD status quo.
Sure. Warwick, I'm just going to have to say goodbye very quickly to our SABC 3 viewers who will now switch to the Mzansi Super League cricket action. Udo Carlson, the team, joining us now. And we continue, of course, to have our business news on channel 404. But do have fun as you check out that Mzansi League cricket action. All right, Warwick, of course, changing ship, so to speak, on that front. But let's continue to talk about the market a little bit more. We saw Steinhoff and that delay of that report. 2017 and 2018 earnings cannot be released as yet. Also, bad news continues to flow out. Any recovery in sight for this one?
Well, I mean, it's just blow after blow. I think as we have seen by the various work done by Amma Bagani and Rob Rose and so on, I mean, clearly the snakes go back a lot further in the past, and I think they initially indicated when they suggested a year ago that the report would be out by now. Well, clearly there's a lot more digging involved, and lots of jurisdictions to go through. So the question of how much worse is it than anyone might have anticipated, well, you know, frankly, the share price is very much a call option on whatever's left over anyway. I mean, even if there's some kind of positive resolution, there's always a question of, well, what's going to be left after the shareholder litigation punch-ups, whether in South Africa or the European courts. So
what would you be holding the stock for right now, if you are holding? Because clearly somebody is trading it.
A punt. A punt. That's all. It's a gambling stock. There's no ways that one could realistically look at this and say, wow, I can see a big investment case here. I'd say I can't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the business itself is certainly stuttering and stumbling along. Not much by the way of equity news outside of that, though, when you take a look at, what's happening right now across the board. What would you make of general market sentiment? It has been horrible. We understand that, and it's, fallen just above 14%, I think, for the year. But are we still, in a state where we can say, still look at the fundamentals, still look at companies that, of course, in this scenario, are still cheap, and if you continue to do that, you will get some reward eventually?
Okay, so markets are really all about certainty versus uncertainty and trying to get a handle on it. And for a moment, it looked like we had certainty. My comment last Friday was, well, I think that the pivotal event would be US-China making progress. Lo and behold, for a day, they looked like they had it. Yeah. And then we're back in the doldrums again. But it's the same basic process there. I think markets would very much like to see an understanding starting to develop between the US and China.
Yeah. Warwick, appreciate your time, but really, really do. It has been, as you said, an interesting week. Emerging markets having suffered quite vehemently as well. The market generally suffering at the hands of that global trade tension. If you just take a look at your spots as well, it has been extremely difficult, and I think markets themselves showing that picture. We are up 0.8% thus far just today, so it is a much better day to perhaps close off the week. If it continues thus far, it will certainly help the mark, having started December on a blistering note, going up nearly 3%. Well, we'll continue with more business news right after the break. Do stay tuned. For now, that's where the buck stops.